All right, guys, welcome back to Alum House Sound. Today we're going to dive into the X32, the Studio One DAW, and we're going to talk about how to use this in two different scenarios as a recording device that you can track different inputs into the DAW from the console. You can build a mix in the DAW, or you can build a mix on the console, how to use it with some headphones that you can listen and monitor back to what's going on in the DAW and be a performer set up with a microphone or different inputs and different microphones, drums, bass guitars, keyboards, whatever the case is, that you can go from this to this and back and forth seamlessly, giving yourself some great tools to build some great music with. So as we get started with this concept in this video of using your X32 or your M32 or your digital console as a recording interface, we've got something like this. This is just a basic old Presonus USB interface, which gives you two inputs and two preamps, and you got your USB connection on the back, and you got a monitor out as well as your headphone out. And so you can kind of dial some things in with this type of a unit where you've got headphones and two inputs, and kind of mix between what you would do is a lot of times what you would do is plug in maybe a microphone and a guitar, and you could record those into your DAW, and then you could mix the channels in the DAW. You could add compression and EQ and such, and you can then bring that back into this and by replaying it, and you can adjust the mix of what you hear there, and then you could play another guitar line, or maybe you could add bass into this or keyboards or something, and you can kind of start to layer, and you've just got the two preamps. Well, when you move to something like this, we also have the USB that's already plugged into the back of the X USB card on the back of this. Well, now on this desk specifically, we've got 16 preamps that we can use. We also have the luxury of some headphone outputs, and we've got mix buses. So we can start to really layer some things up. We've got more versatility of how many instruments we can record at one time. And a lot of times, 16 channels gives you the ability to really track an entire band, and then you can record that into your DAW all at one time. I do that at my church. Many people do that at their church every Sunday, and it gives you the ability to track everything, and then you've got options from there. What we're going to do right now is we're going to treat this board like it's this, but bigger. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is get the console fired up. We're going to plug in the USB cable to the laptop, and then we're going to fire up our DAW. Now for me, I'm using Studio One Pro, but you can use Studio One Artist. Is a very nice, I love Studio One. It's very user-friendly. This is an old version. This is 2.5, but it is what it is. You can see here that I've got my X USB card selected, and I'm just going to open up a new song here, and we're going to do an empty song. We'll call it test song. That'll be great, because that's what everybody does when they're doing a little example. And then it's going to load up a blank page. What we're going to do here, we're going to do is come up and we're going to go to song, and then we're going to go to song setup. And this is where we come into our audio inputs and outputs. And what we want to do is make sure that we've got inputs and outputs coming across USB. So I'm going to go into song setup here. And so inputs now, I've got an input left and an input right. I'm actually going to remove these, all of these, remove, and remove, and remove. And we're just going to do one input. So I'm going to do add mono. That's coming from input one. That's fine. I'm going to hit apply. Now, the other thing that's going to be important is we're going to treat this again just like a big interface. So we're going to end up adding and layering all of our inputs and all of our tracks in this. We're going to build a mix in the DAW. We're going to send that mix back into the X32 on two channels across USB. So we've got to make sure that our outputs here are set up, and you can see out 1 and out 2. You probably can't see that because it's so far away, but out 1 and out 2 are selected here, and that's going to be sending our main outs. Now, we'll talk at another point if we want to do kind of a full DAW and push it back through the console. That's a much different setup. So for this, we're going to hit OK. Now what I'm going to do is come up, and I'm going to hit this plus arrow in the top, That's going to give me a track window. I'm just going to do one track, and we'll just call it mic as an input. That's great. We can choose a color, and so down here, this is going to be coming from input 1, and the output's going to go to the main. We'll just hit OK. Look, now we got a track here. That's exciting. So what we get now is if we were to come up and arm this track by hitting the little record thing, and then we came down to the bottom and we hit record, it would start tracking whatever is coming across input 1. But we've got to go to the console and make sure that our routing is right. So if we peek down over here, I don't know what this scene is, but I'm just going to go to setup. I'm going to go to routing. And in routing, we want to go and look at where our inputs are coming from. So right now, all of our inputs are coming from AES50A. I'm going to change that to local, 1 through 8, so that I'm using the preamps on the console for at least the first 8 channels. And I want to make sure that those 8 channels, when they come into the desk, they're also going to go over to the USB. So I got a page over here to card tab. And you can see here, this is set to AES50 as well, but we're going to change that to local 1 through 8. So now if we plug a microphone into input 1 through 8, it's going to be sent over there, but the only one that we're grabbing over here is going to be input 1. So it's just one input that we're going to get up here. So let's plug a mic in and let's see how that works. All right, I had to swap to the GoPro instead of my my normal camera, but what I've got here, I changed the scene, just started with a blank scene, and hopefully you can see the DAW up there, and I'll kind of talk through what I'm doing and we can piece this all together for you. But I've got my microphone plugged in here, and on the meter, when I talk into the microphone, I've got it right on my chin, and I'm coming in at that -12 range. I'm going to back it off just a little bit, but we want to make sure that we're not peaking. We don't need it all the way cranked all the way up, and that way, if you're singing and you're clipping, we don't want clipping. Stay away from clipping. You don't need it to be super loud going into the DAW. The DAW is going to allow you to do all kinds of manipulations and adjustments, but we want to be obviously good gain structure, so I'm going to get it to that kind of -12 point, and maybe you can see that kind of up here on the screen. The other thing to keep in mind too is that the way that this console is designed, it doesn't matter what you do with the EQ, the compressor, anything on this console in this scenario, it goes right from the preamp over into the DAW. So you're going to end up just tracking and recording raw signals into the DAW, and then you've got the ability to manipulate them, edit them, do any, if you want to do EQ and compression in the box, you can do that, but you're getting a straight signal right off the preamp. Another thing to think about, though, is that means whatever this fader is doing doesn't really matter. The fader for your channel, it doesn't matter outside of being able to hear whatever you want to hear, but that's going to be a second scenario to talk through in just a second. Right now, what we're going to do is we're going to record this. So I'm going to come over here. I have armed my track, and I'm just going to hit the record button here. So I'm going to hit record. And now you can see that it's tracking. I've got some stuff going across the screen on the DAW up there. And I'm just talking into the microphone, and we're getting this, and we're going to say that this is our track, and this is great. And now we're going to go ahead and stop what we're doing here. So we've stopped that. And I'm going to close the browse window over here on the DAW. I'm going to shrink my audio down to get this all in one window. And there we go. That's our track from beginning to end. Now, the important part here is we want to turn off our recording on this track. Okay? So just like if we were using this little 2-channel input, we want to make sure that this is muted now in terms of recording, because we don't want to re-record over that track. You want to make another track, a second track, if you will. If you're doing multiple inputs, just make sure that you select them all. And like if you're tracking drums and you get 6, 8, 10 microphones on drums, you want to track them all, and then you can arm them or de-arm them so that you're not going to record back over top of them. Because now the next thing I can do with the most simplest version, I can come up here, I can duplicate this track. Now it's going to rename it mic 2. And if I hit the record, if I arm the recording, I can see that it's metering up there. Another thing I can do here is bring up the mix window. And that's, let's turn off this and this. But we can see that it's metering down here as well as this little window up there. But now at this point, I can come back to the beginning, all right, and I can hit record, and now I'm recording a second track. And so now I've got two tracks going on with my voice. I'm not saying the same thing, but that's okay. And this is the only information I need, so I'm going to hit the stop button now. All right. Make sure to de-arm or unarm that track, and now we're good to go. If I want to change the color, I can do that. I can just click up here, and now we've got two tracks that look like the same color. All right. That is tracking with one input coming from the console. Now what we do is we've got those tracks, we want to mix them. So we're going to go over and kind of get a little closer on that. Maybe I can just do a screen capture, show you what I'm talking about, because we want to be able to mix these and hear them back through the console. So that's our important next thing to do. All right, so now that we've got our two tracks, the important next thing to do, we've de-armed our tracks. We're not going to record over it. We're done tracking these ones. What we're going to do now is we're going to build a mix, but we need to be able to hear the mix in the console. So we're going to go ahead and stick our headphones into one of these side slots that we can hear them. We're going to use the headphone volume up here to be able to adjust what we hear. If you're on the full-size console, obviously some of these controls are in a different spot, but find the headphone volume and then we can hear what we're going to do. But what we want to check for is our routing, because right now we're going to have outputs 1 and 2 leaving the console, coming across USB leaving the DAW, coming across USB into the console. We want this to come back in auxiliary 1 and 2. The easiest way to do that, I'm going to bring you in real close up here and show you the easiest way to do that. All right, so if we come in close, we're going to hit routing, and we're going to go to the input tab. And right here on the right, the aux in, we can come down and just select card 1 and 2. Let me push that. What that's going to do is remap our auxiliary 1 and 2 input. So for me, I'm going to come over here, find aux in, and this is going to have CO1 and CO2. I need to link these, so I'm going to select, I'm going to come up here to home, sorry, I'm moving a little quick, I'm going to link these, confirm, and now I can pull this up to Unity, okay, and now I've got the ability to be able to solo this and listen to it. I could use the main if I wanted to, but for me, I'm just going to run the solo feature, and that way I know that whatever I'm listening to in my headphones is what's coming back from the DAW. So let's do that next. Let's make sure that we've got some audio coming in, and we'll watch that work. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the DAW. I'm just going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to hit the play button. We're going to see our two tracks here. We're going to see some audio there, and if we peek down here, we can see some metering happening. We've soloed, so we're going to see it here, and we can see it as well on the channels there. So that's exciting. That part's working right now, so we're going to hit the stop button, and we can come up here on the console. If we're working with this, we can kind of select a section. We can turn on the loop, and that way it would just kind of loop over and over. We can work on whatever sounds we want to do. But the next thing to talk about is what we can do here. We can come in on this voice that we did, and we can add an EQ. Okay, so we can see things working here. We could maybe do some fancy EQing of that voice, and then maybe we want to, I don't know, add a compressor. Compression is always fun things to add. So we can come in here, turn our threshold down. We'll start getting some compression in there, maybe some makeup gain. And now let's say we've done that on both of these tracks. They're good to go. Even if we pan this left and pan this right, and let's for really good grins, we can turn this right channel way up. And now I can see on the console the right channel of my aux 1 and 2. The right channel is louder. If I turn this left one down, we can see that the left has gone away. And so we know that this is working properly. It's following what we want to do. And we're going to end up using this DAW with its plugins to manipulate the sounds and then send them back into the console. So we're going to stop this and now talk about how we would track additionally, where we can kind of line up and hear what's going on. All right, so I went ahead and pulled up a different project that's just a Sunday morning recording for my church, but what we've got is kicks, snares, some toms, we've got drum mics, we've got a bass guitar, acoustic guitar, lead vocals, and then you can see kind of this darker is my main mix, and then the stream mix is kind of the green at the bottom. But what I've done is I've just set it so that these are a mix going into the main mix of this. And we want to show that we can hear that coming back into the console. So I've got my headphones plugged in here. They're just plugged into the side. And I'm just going to turn these out like this. And that way we can kind of hear that we've got audio. So if this is our mix here, let's see. Let's get to a bigger part here so you can actually hear it. All right, so we've got some sort of a mix coming through here. And now what we can do is actually start to build a monitor mix, because if you're a vocalist and you're trying to track over this, maybe a harmony part, and you put the headphones on, you're not going to hear yourself coming through here. You're going to want to hear yourself directly from the microphone. So what we would do is we would unsolo what's coming back in. And instead, what we're going to do is come over and we're going to take a bus mix, and let's say it's bus 1, and we can go ahead and select this, hit sends on fader. We can bring our mix from the DAW up into our monitor, and then we can also come back and find our microphone, and we can bring our microphone up into our monitor. So you can see now that the monitor is working here as I'm talking, and then if I stop talking and I hit play over here, so we have our signal coming in, and then I can also talk over. See how it jumped up really, really big when I started talking into it. So basic concept of building a monitor mix there, but we can now solo this monitor mix, and we can hear it out the headphones. Let's get even crazier. Let's go with a stereo monitor, because we've got the luxury to. So we can go ahead and select this. We can hit link. We're going to confirm that we're linked. Now that second fader pops up to match. It automatically pans hard left and hard right. And now we're going to have whatever our stereo mix is from the DAW coming back into here, mixed into our headphone mix, which we're going to solo. That's going to go into our headphones. We can also hear our microphone in our headphones. So we get our own little monitor mix. This is Recording Studio 101 here, but I want you to see how this works. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a track up here. We're going to record into that track, but we're going to push one important button. I'm going to fly into the DAW to see that one button. All right, so we're over here. We're going to go ahead and say that this is where we want to add this track. So we're going to hit the plus button. All right, we're in mic 1. Let's make this one yellow. That just seems fun for today. Input 1, we're going to hit OK, and let's scoot it all the way down to the bottom. All right, now I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that we can see what I'm going to hit. Whew, all right, that zoomed in big. So let's get you up here close and see what we're going to do. All right, so our normal button to push here is our arm track, and that's great. But see this button right here? This button says monitor, and we want to not monitor because we don't want this track to get pushed through into our mix over here and back into our headphones. It's going to come back delayed. It's going to be latent because of the transmission time of the computer and the USB signal. So we're going to unmonitor, okay? And I even go as far as to turn this fader all the way down. It's not going to impact what's recorded, but that way when I track, it's going to go ahead and get captured. I'm not going to possibly hear that back through the mix. Then we can come back into the DAW. We can listen. We can mess with that track, EQ, compression, all that good stuff. So let's see how that works. All right, so I hit record, and now we can see that my meter is metering over here. and we've got some track. It's really small, but it's tracking there. We'll zoom in a second, and I can hear everything here. I can even hear myself talking through these headphones. Maybe you can hear that as well. But that's going on right there. So we've got a full studio environment set up with the DAW and the X32. Let's go ahead and hit the stop button. And so if I come over here and I can zoom in now to what we just did, our performance. So we can see now that we've got this track. Now let's not forget to unarm. Okay, and now we're good to go. Now we've got another track. We can go ahead and bring this track up if we want to. We can kind of expand and again start EQing and compressing everything here. And if I come back, I'm gonna crank this thing up a bunch. But if I turn this up, now what I can do is I can come back, and if I listen in this, hopefully we'll be able to hear some singing and me talking. Meter is metering over here, and we've got some track. It's really small, but it's tracking there. We'll zoom in. There we go. So that's grabbing independent tracks, building a mix in the DAW, sending it back into the console, being able to monitor it through a headphone monitor bus, and then we've got all of our plugins are right here. All right, so that first concept that we talked about, the first approach that we talked about was recording individual tracks or maybe multiple tracks at a time, building the entire mix into the DAW, sending your main out back to the X32, and then monitoring it through headphones, listening to it through headphones, that you can make adjustments either to each channel in the DAW or by monitoring so that you can sing along and play along with what you've already mixed. Now the next thing is, how can we use the X32 as a recording desk? You know, it's got this USB recorder up here, a 2-track recorder, which gives us the ability to use all of the plugins and everything that are on here, the channel strips, the effects. We can build a nice mix here on the console, and we can record it to a 2-track, left and right up there. We could also record it back into the console if we wanted to, but I'm gonna use this as an example. This is very similar to when we do a virtual sound check. So I'm gonna flip some things around on this console, get it set up for what that might look like, and then we'll kind of talk through that process. All right, so let's fly in here to the DAW. So sadly, I'm going to remove my, my fun little track that I recorded. And what I want to do is come up to Song, and we're going to go to Song Setup, and we're going to look at our outputs here again. So what we did is we tracked left and right for the main output. We're going to deselect that and hit Apply, because what we only want now is all of our inputs to have a specific output to go out. And so we've got 32 of those set up, and then we've got all of our inputs as well coming in, but we've already got our inputs in this case, so I'm going to hit OK. Let's zoom this back out and shrink some things down. There we go. Now we can see all of our tracks there. And more importantly, down here at the bottom, I'm going to push these buttons on the side and kind of expand things so you can see what I've got set up. Each input has a pre-fader mix going out. So if I click this is going to turn on. This is like a little fader volume, or on the old school analog consoles, this is your knob of what you're sending out, an aux mix. Well, this is like aux mix 1, and this is aux mix 2. Let me turn that one back on. And it's pre-fader. So there's a little button here on my console that, on my DAW, pre-fader versus post-fader. So it goes from blue to orange. Post-fader means that if I moved these faders and built a mix, that these sounds would be impacted going back into the console. Well, I want my raw track to be recorded and then sent back into the console. So I'm doing a pre-fader mix. So nothing in the DAW is going to impact what goes back over to the console. Now in this scenario, you can see I've got only about, I don't know, 16 or 18 tracks that are recorded. I have some others that were recorded, but these are like mixes. Again, this is like my main mix for my house, and this is my live stream mix that I recorded out when we did this service. But we're going to use this as just a tracking tool to send back into the console. So I'm going to hide all of these things. I'm going to shrink that back down. And let's go and look at, let's hit the play button. All right, so we can see all of these things are metering, and that's good. I'm going to hit stop for a second, and let's go look at the console now to see what we need to do there. All right, so on the console, we're going to hit routing. And now before we had like our inputs were coming from local 1 through 8 and all that stuff. We've switched this because this is a different scene. But we want all of our inputs right now to come from the card. So I'm going to go here and just switch this to play. And notice how it kind of sets up over top of my card inputs. Now if I push it, they're reselected now to card. Notice that this is back on auxiliary because if I had card 1 and 2 set up, again, this is just a different setup than what we were doing before. But using that quick record to play switch really helps me be able to build things and track things in. So now at this point, I've got the ability where all of those tracks are going to be coming into these inputs, and I can start to mute and unmute and mess with things. I can monitor them in my headphones. I can use all of this console. So if I hit the play button now, all right, so we can see all of these tracks here. And actually, if I pause this video and turn on my monitors, we can actually hear things without needing the headphones. All right, so at this point, I'm going to bring up my mains because we would kind of be listening through the mains. And I'm going to just unmute the drums and see if we can hear things here. All right, so we've got some drums here. So I could listen to just the kick drum. And I could fine tune the EQ or the compressor, the gate or whatever. I can listen to the snare drum with all of its reverb on it. Kick and snare. So this is just a virtual sound check like you've seen in many videos where we can record straight from the console into the DAW, send back from the DAW into the console. And what you've got now is where you can do a hybrid approach. You could record the drums here on these channels, and then we can use a bus, okay? And we could come in and we could listen to the bus with just the drums going in, and then we could add bass, and we could record just the bass. And what we would be doing is using the routing up here. We would end up doing some custom routing, and this is where it gets a little bit more complex. Maybe what I'll do is show this to you on, well, let's just do it here. We're here. So I'm going to scoot all the way over to user in. All right, and for our input here, we're going to do an example where drums, you can see we have drums set up on 1 through 6, and then bass is 7. Well, let's say we're going to plug the bass into the console, but we want to be able to monitor 1 through 7 from USB. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here, and we're going to do channel 1, card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But now 7, we want to come up and do local 7. Okay? And then we're going to go back over here to our input tab. And now we're going to scroll down here for the first one and do user in 1 through 8. And what that's going to do, if we look down here, card coming in 1 through 7. See, it's got the little C there, but 7 is natural. And so if I plug my microphone into 7, we would be able to now record from here going out the card, because again, we've got our card set up as local 1 through 8. So whatever's coming in local, we're going to be able to hear it here. It's going to be captured and go into the card. But keep in mind, local, if your drums are still plugged in 1 through 6, then you're also going to possibly be recording. So make sure that those channels are not armed. So we've got a lot of different things to think about. This concept of using the desk is a bit more complex in terms of the routing. You've got to kind of switch things every time you add an instrument. It's not quite as easy as just tracking it all into the DAW, doing your mix there and sending it back in. But you do have that capability of using all of the onboard effects, all of your buses, the limiter, the compressor, and then get a nice 2-track recording out of here that you can use as your final mix down. All right, so now we've got the ability to mix everything here on the console. We can really solo some things, fine-tune some stuff. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope that you found some tips that you can use for using this console to the next level with a DAW, being able to record tracks, mix tracks, even track things back into the desk if you needed to. Obviously they've got the X Live card gives you an SD capability right on the board that you could record into an SD card, not even need a DAW. You can't do the mix down, but you can do the virtual sound check process here and do some really cool things right on an SD card. You can expand this, you can grow it with different monitors, monitor mixes, you can use the buses, the matrices, and get some really nice sounds out of this desk and a DAW. But thanks for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.